The lost kingdom of Kush, Black Pharaohs who ruled Egypt. For thousands of years, the sands of the Nile Valley have hidden stories far older, deeper, and more complex than what most people imagine when they think of ancient Egypt. Everyone knows the pyramids of Giza, the golden mask of Tutankhamun, and the powerful pharaohs who ruled one of the greatest civilizations in history. But far fewer people know that at one point, Egypt did not rule Nubia. Nubia ruled Egypt. And the pharaohs who sat on the throne of Upper and Lower Egypt were not Egyptians at all, but kings of Kush, rulers from deep in the lands of ancient Sudan. Men whose skin was dark, whose culture was distinct, and whose legacy has been buried, overshadowed, or ignored for centuries. This is the story of the Kushite Empire, the forgotten African superpower that rose from the southern Nile, conquered Egypt, and created a dynasty known today as the Black Pharaohs, the rulers of Egypt's 25th dynasty. To understand the power of Kush, we need to go back to a time when Egypt was still young. Long before pyramids dominated the skyline of the Nile Delta, ancient Nubia was already developing a complex culture. The first settlers in Nubia farmed, herded cattle, and built small communities along the fertile banks of the Nile, just as their northern neighbors did. Over time, these early Nubians learned to work with copper and stone, developed their own forms of art, and created trade networks that stretched deep into Africa. While Egypt grew into a kingdom of monumental architecture and divine kingship, Nubia was not simply a vassal or a shadow. It had its own identity, a fierce, warrior culture known for archery, cattle wealth, and a deep spiritual connection to nature and the Nile. The Egyptians respected the Nubians, feared them at times, and traded with them extensively. When Egypt needed gold, incense, ivory, or exotic animals, they looked south. Nubia was rich in resources, especially gold, and many Egyptian pharaohs launched campaigns into Nubia to secure mines, establish forts, and control trade. This early relationship was not equal, but it was deeply intertwined. Over time, Egypt conquered parts of Nubia and established control over northern regions. But while Egypt built temples and administrative centers, Nubian culture adapted, absorbed influences, and continued to grow strong. The southern part of Nubia, untouched by Egyptian control, became the heartland of the future Kingdom of Kush. When Egypt eventually collapsed into chaos during the end of the New Kingdom, Nubia saw its chance. Egyptian power crumbled, rival kingdoms emerged, priests clashed with generals, and famine, invasions, and political fragmentation tore apart what had once been a unified empire. For centuries, Egypt would be divided and weak. But in the south, at a place called Napata, a new kingdom was rising. The Kushites began to unify their people, expand their influence, and reclaim lost territories. Their leaders re-established control over the old Egyptian forts and temples in Nubia, and they revived the worship of powerful gods like Amun, a deity whose cult had dominated Egyptian religion for centuries. The Kushite kings were deeply spiritual, and they believed they were chosen to restore order, not just in Nubia, but in Egypt itself. They saw themselves as heirs of the gods, destined to bring back balance to a land that had fallen into chaos. The first Kushite king to step onto the stage of Egyptian history was Kashta, a powerful ruler who extended Kushite influence deep into Upper Egypt. He adopted Egyptian titles, respected Egyptian religious traditions, and began a slow but unstoppable process of merging the royal traditions of Kush with those of Egypt. His strategy worked. Egyptian leaders, weak, divided, and desperate, could not resist the rising power of Kush. When Kashta claimed control over the holy city of Thebes, he didn't need a massive army. The priests of Amun willingly supported him. They believed Kashta, not the rulers of the fragmented Egyptian states, had the divine blessing needed to guide Egypt out of darkness. Kashta's son Piye completed what his father started. Piye is one of the most fascinating figures in ancient African history, a ruler with the ambition of an emperor and the spirituality of a high priest. He marched north with his armies, defeating rival Egyptian warlords one by one. Piye didn't simply conquer, he purified. He saw himself as restoring the true ancient order, not destroying Egypt, but saving it. And in one of the most symbolic moments of ancient history, the Kushite king performed the coronation ceremony of the Egyptian pharaoh. Piye, a man from the deep south, became the king of Upper and Lower Egypt. For the first time in history, Egypt was ruled by a dynasty whose origins lay outside its own borders. This was the start of the 25th dynasty, the age of the Black Pharaohs. Under Kushite rule, Egypt experienced a cultural renaissance. Art returned to old classical styles, temples that had fallen into neglect were restored, massive building projects were initiated, particularly in Thebes and Nubia. The Kushite rulers respected Egyptian traditions, but they also brought their own cultural elements, blending two powerful civilizations into one unified vision. These pharaohs believed in a strict return to spiritual purity. They emphasized morality, piety, and devotion to Amun. They saw themselves as divinely chosen kings responsible for preserving Ma'at, the cosmic order that held the universe together. Their inscriptions and monuments show rulers deeply concerned with righteousness, justice, and tradition. Among these kings, Shabaka, Shebitku, and Taharqa stand out as some of the most influential. Taharqa, especially, became legendary. Under his rule, Egypt enjoyed prosperity, military strength, and grand architectural achievements. He built temples, expanded cities, and created monuments that rivaled those of earlier Egyptian dynasties. In the Bible, Taharqa is even mentioned as a powerful king who challenged the Assyrians, a testament to his influence in the region. But great power attracts great enemies. To the northeast, the Assyrian Empire was rising, a ruthless, militaristic superpower known for its brutal conquests and unparalleled discipline. The Assyrians saw Egypt and Kush as threats to their dominance in the Near East. Conflict was inevitable. The Assyrians invaded Egypt multiple times, pushing south, destroying cities, and attempting to break Kushite control. Despite fierce resistance, the Kushite dynasty was eventually forced to retreat back to Nubia. Egypt fell into the hands of new rulers, but the story of Kush did not end there. Even after losing Egypt, the Kingdom of Kush continued to thrive, shifting its capital from Napata to Meroë, further south. This new era of Kushite history lasted another 1,000 years. Meroë became a center of iron production, trade, and unique African culture. Its queens, the powerful Kandaks, ruled as fiercely as any king. Its language, writing system, and art evolved into a distinctive civilization unlike anything else in the ancient world. The pyramids of Meroë, smaller but more numerous than those of Egypt, still stand today, silent witnesses to the power of a kingdom most people have never heard about. By the time Kush eventually fell, centuries after the Roman Empire had risen, it had left behind a legacy of pharaohs, pyramids, temple, and an empire that once ruled the ancient world. Yet today, many people barely know the name Kush. They don't know that Sudan, not Egypt, has the most pyramids on Earth. They don't know that the 25th Dynasty revitalized Egyptian culture. They don't know that some of the greatest pharaohs who ever wore the double crown were African kings from the lands of Kush. The story of Kush is not just a side chapter in Egyptian history. It is a story of power, resilience, and identity. A story of a kingdom that rose from the shadows of its northern neighbor, then conquered it. A story of leaders who believed they were chosen by the gods to restore balance in a world falling apart. A story that challenges everything people think they know about ancient Africa. This is the legacy of the Black Pharaohs. This is the story of the lost Kingdom of Kush. And it is a story the world is only just beginning to rediscover.